We've already broken down all the big moves at running back, and now it's time for the receivers. Some top name receivers are switching teams also, and we're going to break down what it means, who are the fantasy winners or losers. We might as well start with the most surprising move. Previously we discussed Calvin Ridley either staying in Jacksonville or maybe going to the Patriots, who had given him an offer. And of course, he did neither one and went to Tennessee. This is another out of nowhere move from Tennessee, who I think nobody expected to do much of anything in free agency. Chris, are the Titans building an offensive juggernaut?
They're trying to. I don't know if it's going to be an offensive juggernaut, but they are certainly trying to, and they are telling us what they want to do, and that is pass the football. New head coach Brian Callahan. This isn't going to be 3 yards in a cloud of dust with Derrick Henry. We're going to see them throw the ball. They've brought in a pass-catching running back to go with another pass-catching running back. They now brought in another high-level wide receiver in Calvin Ridley when they already had DeAndre Hopkins. They are going to throw the football. The question is, can Will Levis support all these people, and can he make this engine go and make it hum the way Brian Callahan wants to? So certainly I think the volume is going to be there for Calvin Ridley. Obviously, he's going to have to fight with DeAndre Hopkins for targets. I do worry that maybe his quarterback play won't be there. I'm not completely out on Will Levis, but I'm also not completely sold on Will Levis. So I really think we're going to see the same Calvin Ridley we saw last year. I think there's going to be some weeks where you're really happy you started him, and there's going to be some weeks where you wish you hadn't, and it's going to be another roller coaster ride.
Well, they definitely are going to pass the ball more, a lot more. That goes without saying. But my question here is, are they going to pass it as much as the Jacksonville Jaguars did last year? And look, I do like Levis, and I think he's probably the big winner here of all of this, right? He's got now an actual good supporting cast around him, not just two veterans, with Derrick Henry and DeAndre Hopkins, and that's it. I think that Ridley will be productive at times, but again, I don't know if the volume is going to be there, but also he's got a really good receiver next to him still in DeAndre Hopkins, who sure he isn't what he used to be, but he's still a quality receiver. Treylon Burks is still there. And they got two running backs now that they're going to use. I mean, there's only so many mouths to feed, if you know what I mean. And I don't know that this will still be one of the more high-octane passing offenses. So I think you have to slide Ridley down at least a little bit compared to last year. And again, I wasn't taking Ridley. I wasn't all in on him. Third-round Calvin Ridley was too much for me. I would have preferred him like fourth or fifth round. I think now I see him more as a sixth round value. If there's one team we know is going to pass the ball, it's the Kansas City Chiefs. Did they finally actually get a receiver that we've heard of? They did. Marquise Hollywood Brown. Everyone's going to be all over Hollywood Brown now that he's a Chief, but are you?
Absolutely. This seems like the perfect match here. Because the problem with Hollywood Brown in Arizona was they asked him to play the X receiver. And they asked him to play the X receiver a lot in Baltimore too. It's not what he's good at. He's a small receiver. He can't handle press. He's not good against press. But you get him against zone, you get him line up over the field, you get him free releases off the line of the scrimmage, this guy can be awesome. We've seen it before. And now he's going with Patrick Mahomes. And who else do they have here? I mean, look, people were way too high on Rashee Rice this offseason. Going in the second round of best ball drafts was absolutely nuts to me. I think now we're going to see him drop, but I think we're going to see Hollywood Brown maybe even pass Rashee Rice in draft stock. I think Marquise Brown has way more weekly upside in this offense than Rashee Rice does. He's better yards after the catch. He's faster. He's just a better all-around wide receiver. I think Hollywood Brown is going to smash this year. Really, it just comes down to, do we get 17 healthy games from him?
That's definitely an issue for him. Look, my days of getting Hollywood Brown in like round 11 or 12, the end of our mock drafts, are over, right? Now we know where he is. Everyone's going to be all over him because he's a Chief. It's not just a matter of being, oppositional or zigging when everyone zags or whatever. Like, I get it. Everyone's all over Hollywood Brown now as a Chief. They're going to be for a reason. And so for that, I'm worried that he might be drafted too high because I also am worried about target share. Here's the thing. Like you said, they tried to slot him as the X. In both Baltimore and Arizona, he was the number one receiver. Like, there really wasn't a question about that. They tried to make him number one guy. He doesn't really fit that mold, I don't think. So it's a more natural spot for him here. I think it's going to be a great fit. But he was one of the leaders in target share for air yards last year. 32% is pretty high because they didn't really have a whole lot else at receiver in Arizona, and they didn't have anything in Baltimore when he was there either. I just, worry with Travis Kelce there, Rashee Rice there. Patrick Mahomes likes to spread the ball around these days, and so Hollywood is going to have his moments. I just don't know if he's going to be a stud on a weekly basis, and so as a result, he might get drafted a little too high. And then we have a trade, a big-time trade that, again, I didn't think was going to happen. Well, the Chargers just don't seem to want to pass the ball because they cut Mike Williams, and now they traded Keenan Allen, who did not want to take a pay cut to stay. And where did they trade him to? The Chicago Bears. Now, assuming that we have any idea who the quarterback is going to be in Chicago next year, what do you think of this?
I think it's okay for Keenan Allen. I mean, we know the quarterback is either going to be Justin Fields or Caleb Williams. I think either way it's going to be fine. My issue here with Keenan Allen is, first of all, number one, he's 32 years old. He missed, the last 4 or 5 games of the season last year? Okay, look, I know you can't predict injury. Well, 32-year-old wide receiver who's missed significant time of his career. I mean, you're already rolling the dice that this guy can somehow play 17 games. But also, whether it's Fields or Caleb Williams, I don't feel like this is going to be an offense that is going to throw the ball a ton necessarily. And Keenan Allen is a guy who last year had a ton of receptions because they had to throw to him. They had nobody else. He got all the targets there, and they were a high-volume passing offense. They have DJ Moore in Chicago. He's more the big play guy. He's still the number one guy. Yeah, Keenan Allen is still very good for an underneath possession-type receiver, but is he going to get the volume that he needs to be a stud in fantasy like he got last year? I don't think so. I think he'll be fine. I think he'll be okay this year. But this certainly isn't as good as if he was on the Chargers, where basically they have nobody else to throw to. So I think you got to tick Keenan Allen down a little bit. Still solid, still like a wide receiver too, but I don't think we're going to see anything close to what we saw last year.
You said it perfectly. You cannot be as high on Keenan Allen, not nearly as high, because, look, he got peppered with targets because this was a team, the Chargers last year, that had a terrible defense, again, which is why Brandon Staley's not there anymore. And Mike Williams gone for the season in, week 3? And Quentin Johnson not doing very much as a rookie. So, yeah, Allen was carrying the load because he had to. And this was a team that threw it a lot. The Bears, whoever, whether it is Caleb Williams or Justin Fields or whatever, they're not going to throw it as much as last year's Chargers did. And we don't really know for sure if it is Caleb Williams, if he's really going to be up to the task in the very beginning of his NFL career to, have a number one receiver that is a number one fantasy receiver. And, they already have DJ Moore. So to me, this obviously moves Allen down, but this definitely throws a lot of cold water on my DJ Moore early second round pick thoughts. I'm not drafting him nearly as high either. And then the Panthers went out and got themselves a number one receiver. It's Diontae Johnson. A lot of change in Pittsburgh, but let's talk about Diontae and the Carolina side. Can he be any better or even as good as he has been with Bryce Young in year 2?
Yeah, when we covered him on the other video, it was right after it happened. It was very fresh, and I kind of said on there, I think this is kind of a lateral move for Diontae Johnson, but the more I think about it, the more I like this for Diontae Johnson, because we just talked about it with Keenan Allen. He got peppered with targets because they had nobody else to throw to. Who do the Panthers have to throw to right now? Jonathan Mingo is not it. Terrace Marshall is definitely not it. Adam Thielen was okay last year, but now a year older. I think we could see Diontae Johnson just get a zillion targets here and just on sheer volume be good in fantasy. And look, maybe Bryce Young doesn't take a major leap, but if he does, Diontae Johnson could be even better than that in fantasy. So I've changed my stance a little bit on this. I've gone from kind of thinking this is lateral, doesn't really do anything to him, to I think he can be a high volume wide receiver and a week in, week out good player in fantasy.
I completely stand behind my thoughts on Diontae Johnson. I think he's going to be a surprising stud because of that target share. It's so important. You don't have to be the fastest, the most talented receiver in the world. If you're in a team that's passing the ball enough and you're getting most of those targets, you're going to be productive. So let's think back. Last year, Adam Thielen, for the first half of the season, was a top 10 fantasy receiver. I think at one point he was even number 1 after the first few weeks, if I'm not mistaken. And that was Adam Thielen. Now you have a guy who's younger, better, and even if you assume Bryce Young is just slightly better than last year, where he was one of the least efficient quarterbacks in the league, even if he's just a little better, all of this kind of points to Diontae Johnson being a stud in fantasy, so I'm all over him, and I don't think people are going to be that excited because he's in Carolina. Now, we want to get excited about a receiver in Buffalo catching passes from Josh Allen, but what if it's Curtis Samuel? Chris, does that do anything for you?
You know I'm getting sucked into this. You know how I feel about Curtis Samuel going back years and years. I've always liked Curtis Samuel. You got to like this for him. I mean, I'm not like going to go crazy like I did with Hollywood Brown or anything, but you got to like this for Curtis Samuel. He's going to a much better quarterback, a much better upgrade there. Gabe Davis gone. I mean, who is really competing here? Khalil Shakir, Stephon Diggs, who didn't look quite elite down the stretch last year. Like, I don't think Curtis Samuel is going to smash here because we did see down the stretch the second half with Joe Brady. This wasn't an offense that threw it 65+% of the time. So I don't think he's going to smash, but I think he's going to have many productive weeks here. He's going to be one of those guys that you're going to draft late and you're going to feel fine putting him in your lineup if you have to. Not necessarily like a guy you're going to want in your lineup probably every single week, but if you have to start him, you're going to be okay with it.
Well, the one thing I will say is that I don't think he'll be really any worse or any better than he was in Washington. He's a guy who once in a while will come out and have a big game and then disappear for a while and then do it again. We had no idea what to expect with Washington's offense. We still don't really know what we're going to expect from next year's Washington offense. We kind of know what Buffalo's offense is now. Again, second half of last year, once they switched to new offensive coordinator, is what I'm talking about. And they're going to spread the ball around. So that kind of helps Curtis Samuel stay relevant maybe throughout the season, but it also limits his upside. And it's not like he's ever going to be a number one receiver for any team. So I'll take a couple shares of him in best ball, and I'll draft him late. He's a guy you can plug in and stream once in a while in favorable matchups. So it's good for him, but it's not great. But hey, at least he'll probably be less frustrating than Gabe Davis. Speaking of Gabe Davis, he's also on a new team. That's right, Samuel in at Buffalo. Davis is out, and he's taking Calvin Ridley's place in Jacksonville. Is this in any way better for him?
No. I mean, how can it be better than playing with Josh Allen during the years when the Bills were one of the pass-heaviest teams in the NFL and Josh Allen was playing like an MVP player? I mean, it doesn't get better than that. Gabe Davis is what he is. Look, maybe in real life, Gabe Davis does some things like blocking or whatever that are good for football teams. But in fantasy, he doesn't. He just doesn't. I don't care where he goes. He's like Marquise Valdes-Scantling. Every now and then he'll catch a long touchdown and people will get excited about him. Then he'll start him and get nothing from him. I don't care. No, I'm out on Gabe Davis forever.
Yeah, I mean, you really shouldn't be drafting Gabe Davis anywhere at this point. And I will say, I'm not even trying to be condescending, but Gabe Davis, one thing that he has brought to the table, and I've heard this over and over again, is like you talked about, the intangibles. He's been the captain, like a team leader. He's one of those guys, like a locker room guy. And good for Jacksonville. That might help them. It's not going to help him or Trevor Lawrence in fantasy, though. And then on the heels of Kirk Cousins going to Atlanta on the very first day of free agency, now we have a little bit more answer in terms of who else is going to catch passes besides Drake London and Kyle Pitts. Well, Darnell Mooney was signed there to be the number 2 receiver, and they traded Desmond Ridder in order to get Rondale Moore. Do either of those guys interest you now in this new look Atlanta offense?
Darnell Mooney will interest me in best ball, where I just care about, spike weeks, and I don't have to worry about am I starting him this week or not. Because Darnell Mooney is probably going to hit some home runs in this offense. He's got speed. He's going to be the vertical guy. He'll do some other things, but I don't think he's going to be a guy you're going to want in your season-long leagues to count on week in and week out. Rondale Moore, no. I mean, maybe this is better than Arizona. I mean, maybe not. I mean, he's a low ADOT slot guy. Yeah, sure, every now and then, same thing. He'll catch a touchdown or something. But you're never going to want him in your fantasy football lineups because there's always the risk that he just crushes you. So Darnell Mooney in best ball, sure. Rondale Moore, probably not.
I've never been on Rondale Moore, and this doesn't change things. I mean, I guess it's maybe a different situation now. I don't think it's even better. Darnell Mooney, yes, will be interesting because he's going to be probably the number 2 receiver. I doubt they add anybody of significance going forward. And Kirk Cousins is going to sling it. So Mooney, not someone you want to rely on week in and week out. But as a late round pick, you could definitely do worse. Those are some of the major moves that have already taken place in the first week of NFL free agency. We already talked about all the running backs. So if you didn't catch that already, check it out here.